realize, it's not about making violence with Israel. It's about discourse. It's about what I'm doing. It's about teaching each other about our own heritage. So in Israel, in Jerusalem, Gershom Scholem and others made a kind of think tank they called the Concubines, where they discussed incredible, profound subtleties of philosophy. Hans Levy, who wrote the commentaries on the Chaldean oracles, one of the great mysterious books of esoteric philosophy that was around in the early part of the of our era, was a member of that group, along with other great Jewish thinkers. Well, and there were Palestinians too. That was at the time of the British Mandate, by the way. I would like to see the recovery of the intellecting potential of both Israel and Palestine, because it's far more interesting to share ideas with each other. It's far more interesting to have a seminar with profound thinkers like Scholem and Levy and Sari Nasabi than to shoot each other. I mean, how primitive is that? How stupid. But we also have to have a means of guaranteeing the infrastructure of people living in Palestine, living in Jerusalem. I was at a seminar at University College many years ago, organised by a great colleague called Michael Safier, who worked at University College in the University of London. And we were discussing the future of Jerusalem. And Michael brought together thinkers and practical people from all branches of knowledge and technology. There were people discussing the waterway system. There were people discussing the drains, the sewage, people discussing the electricity. How will a two-state solution look like in practical nuts and bolts terms? What will happen to Jerusalem if East Jerusalem is allowed eventually to become a capital of an East Palestinian state, which I hope and pray will be the case? Where will it be? What will it look like? What will its transport facilities be like? How will it be guaranteed independence from the Israeli army? Will the Israeli army have the right to march around and arrest anyone? Obviously not. But at the same time, the people of East Jerusalem and Palestine would have to agree not to do terrorist bombings and attacks against Israelis. So that non-violence would have to be at the core and the heart of any two-state solution. And so that that seminar was important. I've got all the documentation and the files of the Institute. It was in the early days of my setting up my Peace Institute, which at one point was very nearly to be based at University College. Unfortunately, for some political reasons in academia, it's a minefield. The problem is that most academic institutions have been taken over by non-academics, non-intellectuals, and the people that tried to hijack the project were, again, the anti-intellectuals, who only think in monetary terms. It's like, can they make a profit about it? Peace? No money in that. Oh, I know. Well, we'll set up an institute of defence studies with George Robertson, who used to run NATO. That'll cream in the money. So peace is always, it's like the Cinderella of academia. And yet, in the fairy tales, Cinderella's the one that gets the prince in the end. I still hope that will be the case with peace studies. One day I'd love there to be a department at University College for the kind of work that is needed for the UK and globally on peace. And the work of people like Michael Safier should go down in the annals of history for those who pioneered the strategies and ways to get peace. And this is why I'm so against Brexit, because I know that it's going to destabilise the UK. We won't be able to contribute effectively to peacemaking. Once conflict starts breaking out again in Ireland, all the nasty military violent types who say, the only way to solve problems is violence and war and security, they're all going to laugh and say, those idealist peace types, we proved them wrong. Look, it's fighting on the streets of Belfast, boys. Better get those guns in operation. I don't want that to happen. That's why I'm fighting a rearguard action like Roland, to prevent violence re-establishing itself on the beautiful island of Ireland, which my ancestors partly came from. Anyway, so fast forward, what do we do about all these Messiah wars? Since I specialise in metaphysics and theology, and I'm one of the few people in the UK, probably one of the few people in the world at the moment, to really focus on the religious aspects of peacemaking in a detailed way for my PhD in modern history. I've come to the conclusion that one of the causes of the instability of religious war and conflict is paradigm clashes about the nature of the Messiah. It's all I can say it, neatly. Different religious groups that are fighting, particularly in the Middle East, have their own ideological commitment to what the Messiah is going to look like, and therefore they see themselves as soldiers in that Messiah's army. Now, the Israeli Defense Force, although Israel is a secular country, it's also very wedded to Judaism. And in marriage, for instance, you can't get married in Israel unless you go to a religious service and it has the blessing of the chief rabbi of Israel. So it's a religious ceremony. There's no secular marriage in contemporary Israel. And so in many ways, therefore, the state of Israel is actually interlocked with the Jewish faith. And the passing out services for the higher defense command of Israeli officers and so on takes place on Masada. I've not been to the top of Masada, I've been to the hill at the bottom near Qumran, and looked up at this incredible fort, which was built by Herod the Great, a huge, powerful king in his own right, and who definitely took the military line on how to solve problems. He lacked the subtlety of the young boy that was going to be born in spite of him, young Jesus. And that's, in a sense, an archetypal polarity in history, isn't it? The Herods are the people, the warlords, who say, no, we'll use the military. And then there's the Jesuses who say, no, let's use peace. The trouble is that even Jesus' messiahship was problematic. Not everybody accepted it. Many of the Jews couldn't relate to it. He seemed a bit of a combative personality. If you asked him a straight question, he didn't always answer properly. He obviously... And if you read the early infancy Gospels of Jesus, purported to be by Thomas, he was quite a difficult child, very precocious, and it wasn't always, the kind of guy you'd want to play with. He was always coming out with kind of complex issues that you don't necessarily want to be constantly reminded of. So no, there was a problematic about his messiahship claim, which has never been resolved, actually, technically and theologically and legally even. I've actually gone so far as to propose there should be a retrial of of Rabbi Yeshua, and that the UN, the international agencies, the Vatican, the State of Israel, and so on should organise actually a retrial. It'd be great theatre, but I think it should be done in real time with real judges, and they should seriously examine the actual evidence. A dear friend of mine at Columbia University did a whole book on law as theatre. She's a professor of theatre studies at Columbia University, and also did a JD and became interested in the law, and discovered that it's fascinating. These courts, they're like kind of theatre performance places. Well, let's put on a theatre. Let's have a retrial of Jesus. People will defend him and say, no, he was, a genius. Some people will say they'll defend him and say, no, he was the Messiah. Others might want to prosecute him and say, no, he was a false Messiah. Look at the Holocaust. Look at what these so-called Christians did. Let's have the discussion. Let's have the debate. I'm going to suspend judgment. My position is both and. As a follower of Nagarjuna in the Buddhist logic tradition, I say and. Whatever gets us to enlightenment. Because that has the highest ethical weight, right? So in choices, if you're given an option, A or B, Nagarjuna says, I'm going to weigh this up and we'll have C, thank you, because that'll get us to enlightenment quicker. So I would say that, I can't predict what would the outcome be of that trial. I think he would probably be found not guilty, certainly of anything warranting death. As far as I can tell from the records, he never did anything, blasphemous, to the point of the death penalty. My view, if I'd have been advising Pilate, if I was his political advisor, I would have said, you know, Pilate, you're in a tricky situation here. You've got all these very angry Jews. You've got these people that, you know, stirring up trouble. You've got his Christians. Most of them are, you know, not that well educated. And so what are you going to do? You know what you should do, Pilate, is set up an academy here in Jerusalem with a branch in Galilee for higher esoteric studies. This man is a genius, this Jesus chap. He thinks he has some way of getting into people to peek into the kingdom of God. He's been reading the books of Enoch. He's obviously a metaphysical genius. Let him teach, give him a professorship, give him an academy. Let him have his students. You know, he can teach whatever it is he's teaching without fear of persecution, without fear of being arrested and tortured and all the stuff that people like to do to genius intellectuals. No, let the man's mind soar. Give him a grant. Get him doing some higher research. Get him writing a book on the links between the Torah and Platonic philosophy, for instance. I mean, does he know anything about that? You know, wouldn't that have been interesting if and wouldn't history have had a much nicer kind of course had Pilate and his cronies thought to actually go the education route instead of the, you know what, no, we'll just crucify him. What we'll do is we'll stick him on a cross, bang nails into him. That's how you deal with intellectuals. Well, my dear friends, it's not. This is the catastrophe that I'm still trying to get right. And I'd like Jesus to be, thank you very much, exonerated after a fair trial. And if somebody can come up with some ancient faded document that proves Christ was secretly a Satanist and was into child sacrifice and all the rest of it, then prove it. You know, if he was that bad, then let the sentence stand. I think he will, so far as I can tell, be let off. I think he was a very kind, amazing teacher. So anyway, that's just my response to that. But then there are other messianic claims coming forward. There's been several in the history of Judaism. And most Orthodox Jews still expect there will be a Messiah at some point who's going to save the Jewish people. There's some dispute in the conversations about this as to whether that Messiah is also going to save everyone else, or is it just the Jewish people, or is it just some of the Jewish people, like the people that follow that particular Messiah, or the people that are Orthodox, or whatever. My dear friend Rabbi Albert Friedlander, who wrote a book about Leo Beck, who survived Theresienstadt concentration camp. Albert Friedlander and I had many, many conversations about this. And he was, one of these progressive reformed Jewish thinkers who believed it's possible to be faithful to the orthodox wisdom of the Talmudic biblical tradition and yet reapply it in today's modern complex world situation. And that part of the duty of the intellectual, a rabbi or teacher, whichever tradition you're coming from, is to make possible a hermeneutic that bridges, that means an interpretative framework, that bridges between our needs as a world now and the problems that the texts were written to address. So, in Talmudic times, the Talmud discusses things like who owns which donkey, and if it goes into your field and eats, do you own the wool on its back? This kind of stuff. We don't normally live in a world with donkeys now. We have cars and etc., etc. So the contemporary rabbi tries to interpret in a modern way the ancient insights. And this is needed, but we need to do it on a planetary-wide basis, because for the first time in history, this is absolutely unique time we're living in. We can talk to each other through the internet. We can communicate by phone, and we're one planet. What Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere is coming into being, which was Aristotle's term for the collective intellect. The collective mind of the planet is now taking form before our very eyes, and it's amazing. And yet, is it really the best we can do? Just go on bombing each other, and because that person's family have for the last 20 generations been Shia, following Ali as the great Imam and his descendants in Islam. And then this person has been following the Sunnah because of Aisha and their traditions. So are we going to fight and bomb each other till the whole world is blown up? I think not. The duty of the philosopher, and there are philosophers in Sunni traditions and in Shia traditions, is to build this hermeneutic bridge which puts peace at the top of the hierarchy of values. You see, every culture has ultimately an ethical teaching system within it. Every nation on the planet, be it Shinto or Buddhist or Hindu or Islamic or Christian or pagan or whatever, and they all have some kind of teaching on ethics. I've gone into this in great detail in my most important philosophical work on being and knowledge. And, I'd love you to read it. If you don't have time, that's fine, just watch these YouTube talks. But if you are a scholar, please sit down and study some of these much deeper books. And you'll see that what I've tried to say there is that nobody knows the absolute truth. We're all like Paul, looking through a glass darkly in that wonderful King James translation. But the glimmers that we do get of absolute truth, I think, teach us that peace is the preferred state for humankind. And therefore we have a duty, whatever our function in society, whether a teacher, a doctor, a street sweeper, a cleric, whatever, a mother, a parent, we all have duties to try and live as peacefully as possible and to try and make that our society is as peaceful as possible and to try and end the conflicts and wars that we see around us. I was brought up in a family which took peace activism very seriously. My mother was one of the peace activists of recent British history and has some degree of name recognition in those circles. And so I think we have to continue that work, all of us, until we succeed. Now, what are we going to do about the problem of the Messiah? Then there's Hindus who say, well, no, there's avatars that come. They come periodically. There was Rama, he was an avatar. There was Krishna, he was a very important avatar, and then there was Buddha even. I mean, what I love about Hindus' toleration and wisdom is that they'll even say Buddha was an avatar. I love that, of Vishnu. And there's 10. The next one to come is going to be Kalki, who'll be the clinch avatar. Well, that's a wonderful tradition, and it should be studied and shared and discussed. But then, where is Kalki? Bring him on. We need it now, please. I think if we're not going to intervene and save this planet now, we might as well pack up and leave the solar system. And I'm not prepared to do that, merely as one philosopher among others. I'm part of that team, if you want. We've made a pledge and a commitment to transform this planet into a peace planet. I'm not leaving this planet till that's done. And I'd like to call on the other members of the team to step up and get on with this job. So what I've done, through the World Intellectual Forum, we've been contacted by some interesting characters who have, let's say, messianic qualities. And at my proposal, what we've done is we've created a thing called the World Messianic Avatar and Seershant Council. It's a mouthful, it's WMASC. World Messianic Avatar and Seershant Council. Now, Seershant, as I mentioned before in these talks, is the Persian term for the Messiah. It means saviour, redeemer. It's a very, very important word. If you haven't heard it before, learn it. Because the Persians, bless them, invented this whole concept of the Messiah. It wasn't really part of Judaism until after they'd sat at the feet of Persian intellectuals in Babylon, according to the latest scholarship. And this Seershant figures in Zoroastrianism. Zoroaster was a great prophet, a great sage, seer, who taught that mankind is under attack from negative forces, diabolic forces. The most important element of them all is the lie, deceit. And you can see that everywhere in society. When people are lying, you've got trouble, institutions fall apart. That's what's happening in Britain with Brexit. It's because people in charge started lying. They didn't listen to what I proposed, which was the parliamentarians sign an oath of veracity. Completely ignored. I sent the proposal to Clegg and Cameron when they were Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, and I never got a reply. It's like, what? Truth? You don't even write back to the guy. The guy's crazy. No, I'm not. if they'd have actually written back and said, you know, Thomas, this is a very good idea, come and talk to us, nothing of what's happened over Brexit would be happening. It was because of their refusal to accept truth as a value worth even discussing that the entire Brexit nightmare has happened. But that's just one example. It's happening, you know, in America. It's happening it's been happening all over in different countries and cultures. So the Seershant is the one that will somehow, and Zoroaster prophesied that yes, one day the Seershant would come. He will get mankind back on to the path of Ahura Mazda and the forces of light and wisdom, and finally see off the lie, Druj, the devil, and Remainu. Now, Zoroaster wasn't really an intellectual. He was a very, very amazing, charismatic, prophetic figure, as far as we can tell, from the remains, the Gathas. There were intellectuals in his entourage later on. Zoroastrianism produced some powerful and important thinkers and intellectuals, and still does. I mean, I've met quite a few Zoroastrian Savills, and they're still around. And I hope that one of them will be sitting on the council that we're setting up. It's interesting that Zoroastrianism doesn't say when this Seershant is going to come back. It could be he or she's already here. It could be in 10 years, 20 years. It could be in 1,000 years. You know, the teaching, as far as I can tell from discussing with Zoroastrian sages, is that it will happen when we're ready, when we warrant this return, and when the time is necessary, the crisis is upon us. There's difficult ambiguities in because if you discuss it with one Zoroastrianism, they say one or another. There's always room for discussion here, and that's the purpose of the council. The council is not to, you know, say that this person or that person is the Messiah and let's all follow their teachings. The purpose of the council is to say, you know, where are the messianic figures now on the planet? What are they teaching? How can we recalibrate and harmonize what they're saying so that we get a sort of common agenda for planetary salvation? I mean, the Christian tradition has its own agenda of what Messiah is. They believe that Christ was that Messiah and that his return is imminent, and that you know, certain consequences will flow from that, one of which will be the eventual arrival of world peace. There will be tribulation and so on, but I would like to say with Christian colleagues that World War I, World War II, the Cold War, the Holocaust, you know, the wars that have been happening in recent history are enough of a tribulation. I think it's time now to move on to the time of peace. I know that some Christian theologians from the more hard-right evangelical front say, no, you know, bring it on, there's going to be the most cataclysmic battle. These are the kind of people that stockpiling weapons in their homes and you know, want fights, want physical battles. For them, the Messiah is going to be a kind of military leader who's going to be like Luke Skywalker, flying a great jet in the sky, a sort of UFO, and zapping everybody that doesn't follow him. I can't buy into that theology. I'm sorry, that theology to me is just childish. Messiahs that are going to do space wars and things are just, sorry, it's playground kids wars, you know. So I'm saying, no, let's have a genuine messianic council. Let the great intellectuals of the planet, from all these different lineages, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, because the Buddhists are expecting Maitreya. You know, there have been several people saying, Maitreya is living in East London. Benjamin Krem was going on about this. I met Ben Krem. And as far as I know, Maitreya didn't show up, although it's interesting, I was living in East London at the time. But, you know, I didn't fit the description. But so where are the other Maitreyas? You know, Krishnamurti was groomed to be Maitreya, and then he was resigned. I mean, I heard Krishnamurti speak towards the end of his life. He said, and I think he's probably right, the Maitreya is a state of being within us all. We all have the potential to be that enlightened Maitreya consciousness, which is about pure love and pure compassion. The word Maitreya means friendship, love, compassion, you know. And it's related to the word Mithras, the god of light, which was, I think, the esoteric, wing of Zoroastrianism. And there were temples to Mithras in Bordeaux near here, and in London, and many other cities around the European world. So, is Maitreya a philosophical state of being that we can reach? I think probably yes. Does that mean that there's no role for teachers or anything? I don't think so. I think a good teacher, a great instructor, a great rabbi, a great priest, a great theologian can help bring us to that Maitreyanic consciousness. Great Lama. I mean, I've met many great Lamas and heard lectures and talks by them. A good Lama will actually just reveal back to yourself your true self. That surely is the point of the findings of transpersonal psychology, Ken Wilber style and Jungian style. It's the finding of that core diamond self in the heart, which Almas talks about. That's what I mean by transpersonal history. That's where history is going, is that collective realization of the planet. So the point of creating a council is not just another bureaucracy, for God's sake. It's to create that collective enlightenment. That's what I call the meta-Mahayana position. That's the solution to the planet's problems. Marianne Williamson bravely announcing she's running for president. Bless her, if she gets elected, Marianne, please put the nonagon on top of the Pentagon. She would, because she's an enlightened soul. So anyway, that's the background. When I said I was going to talk about Brexit from a cosmic perspective, I hope you're getting the picture now. This is where I'm coming from. And what I want this Messianic Council to do is to then negotiate and organise for the reopening of the Golden Gate in the East Wall of Jerusalem. Let's have the theatre, bring it on. The pageant says that at the end of time, Last Judgment, the gate's going to open, Messiah comes back, and world peace. Well, I'm saying, let's not wait for him. Let's not be different. Who's going to go in the gate first? Is it this one or that one? Let's all go in collectively. I'm just a mere little archdruid type. I'll come in last. Let the archbishop and the cardinal and the imam and the chief rabbi and all the bigwigs. I've met lots of these religious bigwigs, and they're wonderful. Patriarch Bartholomew in Istanbul, head of the Orthodox Church, he can come in, and let's reclaim Temple Mount as a universal place of peace and prayers for peace. I see a kind of peace tent, a big peace tent on the dome there, where the kids at the moment play football. I'm sure they can spare a room for a big tent that would hold a few hundred people. And then let pilgrims from all over the planet come in and reclaim that sacred space for meditation, for conviviality, for discussing, for conversation. Now, tragically, just in the last few days, there's been some stirrings at the Golden Gate. The world is a telepathic, interconnected place. So here I am setting up this world messianic avatar and Seishan Council, and lo and behold, people start agitating at the Golden Gate. Agitation isn't the way to get that thing open. And I totally and 100% feel for my Palestinian brothers and sisters who just want to open it. And I think they tried to do it physically. And of course what's happened is the head of the WACF has now been arrested. The deputy head and the head, Palestinians, and the Israeli army are clamping down and so on. Well, it's not the way to go, folks. We have to have a serious discussion in which the state of Jordan is involved, Palestinian Authority, the Israeli government, which is about to change anyway, by the way. I mean, I think Netanyahu's time is over, and there's going to be a new shift in Israeli politics, and new thinking is good. I mean, that's the point of democracy. The same guy doesn't rule all the time. We might as well just call him a pharaoh and do what he says. Netanyahu's acting like a kind of pharaoh, but there's so much evidence trail of stuff that he's been doing that's wrong that I think it's time he moved on. And let's hope that the people taking over, Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid, will be better. I think they will. They're younger, they're intelligent, they're committed to an intelligent solution to Israel's problems. And that's got to revolve and be involved with the question of a two-state solution, and I think some symbolic reopening of the Golden Gate with everyone's permission and approval at the time of a signing of a peace accord between Israel and Palestine. I don't think that's beyond the intelligence of the human beings on this planet. It's so obvious that's what's got to happen, in my opinion, humbly. It would be lovely, wouldn't it? Meanwhile, back to Brexit. You might say, Thomas, what are you talking about? You've gone off your subject here. Actually, I'm setting the bigger picture for what's going on in Britain. Meanwhile, whilst all these very exciting things are happening, my God, Netanyahu finally losing office. Gosh, the Golden Gate might get open, my God. Oh, we might even get a world messianic avatar and Seishad Council going. This is thrilling stuff. Meanwhile, back in rainy old Britain, it's Brexit. I mean, with all due respect, what a ridiculous story to be pursuing. I mean, the sooner Brexit is knocked on the head as an idea. It was, okay, I admire the cheek and the vision of some people that thought this thing up and thought, you know what, we'll take Britain. Britain is a superpower. We're a great country. Look at our lovely Union Jack. We don't want to be with those Europeans. It was based on arrogance and also ignorance, because it was premised on a complete ignorance of Scottish and Irish history. It was premised on a complete failure to understand the history of the European Union. Most of the people that promoted and promote Brexit haven't got a clue about European history or how it worked and why the European Union was set up and why Europeans feel so strongly about it. Come and live in France, my dear friends, and you'll realise the horrors. I mean, we're celebrating or commemorating the Battle of Verdun here in France. It started a few days ago, the anniversary of it. And I have friends in the village here that have collected memorabilia from World War One. It's a living horror story that their grandparents fought in it and so on. And it was completely unnecessary. So the European Union is designed as an insurance system that the European nations will never go to war again. And the way they'll stop it is by doing things like running transport systems and trading systems and agreeing standards for electricity and all kinds of practical nuts and bolts things. This was an idea dreamed up by David Mitrani, a great scholar and philosopher and social scientist who worked at Princeton Institute of Advanced Studies at the same time as Einstein was there. They were colleagues, they'd be sitting in the common room having a chat. Mitrani would ask Einstein, what are you working on today, Albert? And he'd say, I'm trying to get this relativity thing going. I don't understand, And Einstein would say to Mitrani, what are you doing, David? And he'd say, I'm trying to find a way of making sure that conflicting parties can be locked into a peace agreement and they never go to war again. He's trying to work on the secret of finding permanent peace. He got it. He got it right. What he didn't realise is, what do you do if somebody's locked into it and then, is taken over by complete crazy people who then want to destroy the whole thing? Well, we need, the social scientists, the political scientists need to think through the lessons. After Brexit has been stopped, we need to put in a fail-safe system that, obviously, if you're going to have a referendum to say stay in or leave, it has to be a certain majority that vote definitely, yes, we're going to leave, That's one thing that should have been done. The second thing is that if you got a multi-country state like the UK with Scotland, Wales, England, Northern Ireland, and you put it to a referendum, then I think every region should be treated as a separate entity. And if a given region, like Scotland or Northern Ireland, says no, we want to remain, then that should be respected. And then it's up to England and Wales, do they want to leave alone and break up the UK? Really. So these are sorts of consequences. The other thing